You know how you manage your own money, right? You get a paycheck, you pay your bills, you try to put a little bit aside. Well, what if you were in charge of the biggest budget of all? The government's. That's the world of public finance. And let me tell you, the rules that apply to your wallet are fundamentally different from the ones that apply to an entire country. Let's break down why.
So here's a question I bet you've thought about. We're always told, live within your means, don't spend more than you earn. So why does it feel like the government gets to play by a completely different set of rules, often spending way more than it takes in? That's the big question we're going to get to the bottom of right now.
Here's our game plan. First, we'll get a quick definition of what public finance actually is. Then, we'll look at its 5 main jobs. After that, we'll jump into the main event, a tale of 2 finances, looking at all the ways the government's budget is different from yours, and, this might surprise you, the few key ways they're actually pretty similar.
All right, let's dive right in. First up, what even is public finance? To really get why things are so different, we've got to start with a solid foundation. Let's define what we mean by the government's wallet.
Okay, so that's the textbook definition. In plain English, public finance is just the study of how governments, from the federal level all the way down to your local city council, get their money and how they spend it. It's about income and expenses, sure, but its real purpose goes way beyond just balancing a checkbook.
So, what does the government actually do with all that money? Well, public finance isn't just one simple task. Think of it more like a giant machine with 5 core functions, and each one helps shape our entire economy. This image here, it kind of lays it all out. These are the 5 big branches: public revenue, expenditure, debt, administration, and what they call economic policies. Together, these things cover everything from how the government raises cash to how it tries to keep the whole economy from going off the rails. Let's quickly look at what each one of those actually means.
Okay, think of it like this. The government collects public revenue. That's the big treasure chest, and it's mostly filled with our taxes. Then it decides on public expenditure, spending that money on things like roads, schools, and defense. If there's not enough in the chest, it takes on public debt. And the whole process is managed by financial administration. That's the rule book, the gears that keep the machine running. And the whole point of all of this? Economic stabilization. Using all these levers to try and keep the economy stable and growing.
And that brings us right to the heart of the matter. Let's compare this huge, complex public system to something we all know inside and out: our own personal finances. It really is a tale of 2 very different finances. You might think, hey, money is money, right? But believe me, the principles that guide your savings account versus the national treasury are worlds apart. Let's dig into exactly how different they are. We're going to break this down into 4 key differences. And honestly, if you can get your head around these, you'll understand why the country's finances are run the way they are. Okay, get ready, because this first one totally flips our normal way of thinking on its head. When you get your paycheck, you look at it and decide what you can afford to spend, right? The government does the exact opposite. It decides what it needs to spend first, on things like healthcare, infrastructure, defense, and then it figures out how to get the money to pay for it all. The second big difference is all about the why. Your financial choices, they're driven by what's best for you, for your family. But the government's motive is supposed to be about the general welfare, the collective good. And that's why it spends money on things that don't make a profit, like public parks or helping people who are unemployed. Now, this one is huge. For you and me, a deficit, spending more than we make, is a big problem. It means debt. But for a government, a deficit can actually be a useful tool. For instance, if the economy is in a slump, the government might intentionally spend more than it takes in, investing in big projects to create jobs and get people spending again. The goal isn't a balanced budget. The goal is fixing the economy. And finally, let's talk about power. Your ability to get money is pretty limited, right? You can earn it or you can borrow it. The government can do both of those things too, but it also has a unique power that you and I definitely don't have: coercion. It can legally force people and companies to pay taxes. You can't just go to your neighbor and demand a cut of their salary.
So yeah, the differences are massive. It's like they're playing 2 completely different sports, but it's not a totally separate universe. To really get the full picture, let's look at the few surprising ways public and private finances actually do line up. Because even with all those powers and different rules, both systems bump up against the same hard reality: scarcity. At the end of the day, there's just not an infinite amount of money to go around, and everybody, from you to the US government, has to deal with that. And you can see that common ground right here. First, limited resources. No one has a bottomless wallet. Choices have to be made. Second, rationality.
You'd hope that both individuals and governments are making smart, rational decisions with their money to avoid disaster. Third, efficient management. Bad financial planning can lead to a crisis, whether it's for a family or a country. And finally, at their core, both systems are just trying to satisfy human wants, whether it's your personal desire for a new phone or society's collective need for clean water.
So, what's the big takeaway here? The single most important thing to remember is this. The government doesn't balance its budget the way you do because it's not trying to do the same thing. Its job isn't to make a personal profit. Its job is this incredibly complex balancing act of managing an entire economy and promoting the well-being of millions of people.
And that leaves all of us with a really big, important question to think about. Just because the government can play by these different rules, how should it? How do we as citizens decide when it's the right time to spend more, when to tax, and when to borrow money that future generations will have to pay back? That's the ongoing debate that really shapes our world. Thanks for tuning in.